Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast. It is Friday, May 19th, and we are continuing our unit rankings today. We will be looking at the AFC quarterback groups, which I got a sneak peek earlier at the three of our rankings. There seems to be a little bit more disparity than I think we even had with NFC, so I'm looking forward to talking about that. Dennis, I know here it's been kind of rainy and cold, but at least I had a day where I was just flopping around doing nothing. But how was your Friday? I know it's a big milestone for your son today.
Yeah, it was. The weather here is sunny and about 75 with a nice little breeze, so it's not too bad. Caleb had his last official day of school today, and you know he's only had 2 classes all year long. So it isn't like he's had a very stressful senior year. Graduation is on Thursday. Really looking forward to that. And, he's been accepted to Ohio State. He'll start there in the fall. And, right now we're just trying to keep him focused on what he's got to get done in the summer. He's off to the auto parts store right now, or maybe Walmart. He's got to buy some cat litter because he's working on his car and he spilled antifreeze all over the garage.
Accidents happen.
Yeah.
How are you doing? How does it feel to have a high school graduate or just about graduate?
He's almost as old as I am now. That's crazy. It's great. My wife, I don't think my wife is dealing with it well. She went away for the night. She went up to her sister's in Cleveland. So, and me, I don't know. I'm tired today. I'm either gonna, party like it's 1999 because she's gone, or I'm going to bed at 8:00 right after the show. I don't think there's any in between tonight.
I guess it depends on how much we rile you up talking about these quarterbacks.
We'll see.
Well, there's a couple pieces of news. First one, a little bit of a somber note. Great Hall of Fame running back for the Cleveland Browns, Jim Brown, passed away today. Such an iconic figure in the NFL, an incredible runner, still, either the top or at least top 3 in almost everyone's rankings at the position of running back for what he did on the field. Was a great guy off the field as well. Dennis, any thoughts about Jim Brown?
He's 87 years old and he's lived a full life. He fought for justice. He wasn't a perfect guy. He was, he had his own set of flaws to deal with off the field. On the field, he was as dominant as any player I think we've ever seen at any position. He got out young. I mean, he played 9 years, but he ended up, getting out early. He probably had 6 or 7 more high-quality years in him. He was just that much better than players of his era. Also, one of the best lacrosse players in the nation in college at Syracuse. If there was a pro lacrosse league, he could have been the best ever at that as well. But, it's a sad day in Cleveland. We're going to look back, and I got a picture of Don Muehlbach was a former Ohio State offensive tackle who played for the Browns and wrote a book called Heart Like a Mule. And when I worked at Ohio State, he came through one day and we were chatting, and he gave me a copy of his book and an autographed picture of him. I mean, the center of the picture is Jim Brown. Don is there amongst the linemen blocking, but the picture is more of Jim Brown than it is Don. But it was, he was a talent that I think would have transcended eras. I think he was just that good. He was big for his time, and he strived really hard to accomplish a lot of things. Very active in society off the field, and I think he really tried to make a difference there.
Yeah, and had a career as an actor, a whole bunch of other things. I think it's interesting. The two guys that probably would most jump to everyone's mind as the greatest running backs of all time, Jim Brown and Barry Sanders, both of them kind of hung it up when they still had probably life left in their careers, being able to go out on their own terms. And Matt is now here with us. We were just talking about the late Jim Brown. I don't know if you have any thoughts or anything you want to throw out there.
Just rest in paradise, man. I think you could arguably say the best player in Browns history. I don't know if that's really arguable, but just to be, I guess, polite, you say arguably the best player in Browns history. I'd argue one of the best running backs to ever play the game. So Syracuse's best. Syracuse. I'm going to get that wrong. Syracuse best player in college. Sure, yeah. So yeah, I mean, just you obviously hate to see a legend go like that, but lived a very full life. I mean, I know Dennis is a Lions fan first, but I know he is also a Browns fan, and just how connected he's been to that franchise for what feels like forever, always at the games. They were always showing him up in the press box. I mean, he lived a very good life, I'm sure. So just obviously you hate to see anybody unfortunately pass away. So just rest in paradise.
Yeah.
Great in Mars too. If you've never seen the movie, is that what it was? Right? Mars Attacks. I'm sorry.
Mars Attacks. Yeah. That's why I said these are all kinds of movies, some funny stuff. Well, the only other piece of news is the Steelers announced a 3-year contract extension for Mitch Trubisky to be their backup quarterback. Matt, I'll let you go first. You excited about that? Do you have to go make a last-minute adjustment to your AFC quarterback rankings?
No, I honestly forgot he was on the roster. Not that the Steelers were that high up anyways, but no, I mean, hey, look, all joking aside, I think it's a smart move for the Steelers. I mean, he obviously knows the system. He backed up Kenny Pickett last year, and it is hard to find decent backups. I mean, I think it wouldn't be unfair to say if Kenny Pickett were to get hurt, you could still trust Trubisky to go in there and run the offense competently. I mean, the Steelers were not horrible at times when he was in there, so I don't think it's a bad move by them. Not like franchise changing or anything, but it's a decent move, I think.
Just a little foreshadowing. I have Trubisky as my number 2 QB1, or number 1 QB2, number 1 QB2 in this whole power rankings we're doing. And part of it, honestly, is the gap between Trubisky and Pickett isn't really large. It's, I have Blaine Gabbert, who with the Chiefs, as my 3rd QB2. But part of that reason is that the gap between Gabbert and Mahomes is enormous. The gap between Pickett and Trubisky, not so much. So if Trubisky had to go in, I don't think there'd be a lot of changes to the offense to get Trubisky in there. And from Mitch's point, I mean, he signs a 2-year, $10 million deal. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's great money to hold a clipboard. I mean, he's headed into Chase Daniel, Colt McCoy territory now. The next 10 years, Trubisky just has to be ready. That's all. His job the next 10 years is to be ready. He's going to make $3 to $5 million a year just to be ready. And if it's behind Kenny Pickett or somebody else, that's, ask Chase Daniel. That's great work.
Actually, I think this year he's making $8 million, according to what I saw. All I want to know is what size fruit basket Deontay Johnson sent him, because they were just so close last year. Well, that's a good segue. We are looking at the AFC quarterback depth charts here, and we are ranking them on their entire depth. Each of us brings a little bit something different to that. We're going to go 16-1. We did NFC quarterbacks on Monday, and Matt, I will let you kick it off. Take us to from 16 to 13 in your rankings.
All right, so starting at 16 for the AFC, I have the Tennessee Titans. Again, I think you could argue number one on anybody's list. They've got two number one overall quarterbacks in their respective classes, and Will Levis and Malik Willis on the roster. But I just think this roster outside of Ryan Tannehill is very bad. I don't personally think Will Levis is a very good quarterback. I don't think he's much better than Malik Willis. Malik Willis is going to, I believe, why did I forget his name? Vrabel. There we go. I don't know why I wanted to say Schottenheimer. Weird name to have stuck in my head at the moment. Vrabel's come out and said that Malik Willis will technically start the year as the 2 with Will Levis as the 3. I imagine probably by the time we get to the start of the year, Will Levis will actually be QB2. Does not inspire much confidence for me. I still think, despite the one throw that has been going all over Twitter from his one throw in practice, rookie practice, I just think he needs time to develop. But I do like Ryan Tannehill. He has had some impressive years. I just don't think he's long for the room. So that is why they came in last for me, because I would not be surprised if they moved on. Number 2 for me is the Raiders. I think you could argue putting them last as well. I think there was really a 2-horse race between the two of these. But I do like Brian Hoyer, the destroyer. If he were to have to get into a game, I think he could competently run this Josh McDaniels offense. I actually think so could Aiden O'Connell, who, even though he was drafted much later than Will Levis, is still a fairly competent backup. The 14th team for me was the New England Patriots. I mean, some of this is, as I talked about with the NFC quarterbacks, some of this I also put in as systems and the offensive play callers and everything going on around them. Mac Jones is fine. I think Bailey Zappi is fine, but the situation around them is very bad. I don't think either one of those guys are going to be necessarily good for you in fantasy or possibly moving forward. I mean, we already had heard all the rumors that they might even move on from Mac Jones at this point. I don't know what that would mean for them if they were end up going to Bailey Zappi. I know he had a couple good games, but I really do not think Bailey Zappi is a particularly good quarterback. And then coming in at 13 for me is the Houston Texans. I mean, look, I like CJ Stroud a lot. I think he's going to be a very good NFL quarterback. But again, we're looking at this from a fantasy perspective. I think the lack of rushing upside and the lack of weapons around him is likely going to limit him early on in his playing career. Maybe he outplays that, or maybe he continues to get better. But right now, I view him as like probably you're looking at a ceiling of like maybe QB 15. And I think that's being nice, as I don't think Houston's going to allow him to have the volume to really put up those numbers. You know, Davis Mills, Case Keenum are the guys behind him. They're fine. I mean, Davis Mills, we saw had half a season, and then last year really kind of fell back to earth. So I think CJ Stroud, while very good, just his fantasy upside's limited. So that's why they came in at 13 for me.
Well, I came in, my bottom 2 are the same, but I have the Raiders at 16. For me, it come down to, you know, I have Garoppolo over Tannehill, but they're literally 15 and 16 in my QB ones. And the deciding factor is honestly, Jimmy Garoppolo is just a few years younger. That there's not much else to differentiate it. But I have Levis substantially higher than Brian Hoyer. I don't think Hoyer, at the age he is, I don't think he's that good anymore. I don't know that he necessarily, you know, he knows the system. I think the mind is willing, but I don't know if the body is able. And Levis is young. I agree with you. He needs time to develop. But I had Levis as my 6th rated QB2, just based on his raw tools. He does need to develop. So I have the Raiders at 16, Titans at 15. I have the Patriots at 14 as well. So Matt, you and I were real close here. I like Mac Jones. I think he's a game manager type of quarterback, and I think Bailey Zappi is too. And it's very similar to what I was talking about earlier. The gap between Jones and Zappi is not very wide. I think that, the gap with Trace McSorley is pretty wide, their third QB. But I like Mac Jones and I like Bailey Zappi. I think both of them can do the same types of things. Neither one are quarterbacks that are going to put a team on their back and carry them on a 5-win run. At 13, I have the Broncos. Russell Wilson, now, if I believed Wilson could bounce back into his, top 7, top 8 form, he'd probably be higher. But I just think we're hoping that Sean Payton can bring that back out of him, can get him back on track. Is he still saying Broncos country, let's ride? Because I think that's the crux of it. He needs to drop that shit and get back to football and stop the marketing. Stidham, at the end of the year, I thought maybe he was going to get a chance in Las Vegas. I think he's a capable backup. Honestly, the backup for the Broncos, their third stringer, is the lowest rated third stringer, in part because I don't know who he is. I have never heard of Jarrett Garantano. Never heard of the guy.
It's Ben DiNucci now.
So, well, the depth chart I looked at had DiNucci at 4, so I didn't really count the 4s. So Raiders, Titans, Patriots, Broncos are my bottom 4.
Number 16 for me is the Titans. Don't need to belabor it, but if you're telling me that their head coach is saying their number 2 quarterback on the depth chart currently is a guy that they were so afraid to put into an actual game that was meaningful at the end of last season that they signed someone off the street, that tells me all I need to know. Number 15, I also have the Raiders. I actually do think Jimmy G is substantially better than Ryan Tannehill when he's healthy, and that is a big issue. We saw him great when he was available for San Francisco, but also not always available. I actually, if I was being honest, would trust Brian Hoyer more than either Levis or Malik Willis. But beyond that, it's not great, and I still don't know what Brian Hoyer would bring to you if you had to rely on him as a starter. I think Devontae Adams is already complaining about how unhappy he is. 5 weeks of Brian Hoyer, and he might actually take up baseball like Michael Jordan. Number 14 for me, I have the Houston Texans. I like the CJ Stroud pick too. I don't know exactly what they're going to get. I didn't think they put together the most appealing coaching staff in Houston. Beyond that, Davis Mills looked okay at times as a rookie. It wasn't that great last year. Kind of got rotated in and out. Case Keenum is kind of a career backup. I think they have some potential maybe to go up in future years, but that's where I started them right now. And then 13 for me, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers. I thought Kenny Pickett was okay last year. Mitch Trubisky was actually not as, the 2 guys I wanted to see get a second chance and thought that they might do something were Trubisky and Mariota, and both of them are now firmly backups, and that's for a reason. They also re-signed Mason Rudolph for some reason. Pittsburgh has a certain type, and they've collected that certain type, and good on them. It seems to be working okay for them, but for me, I wasn't excited enough to put them any higher. So Dennis, why don't you give us your 12 through 9?
So coming in at 12 for me are the Jets. Aaron Rodgers is my QB 8, but Zach Wilson and Tim Boyle backing him up. Wilson has not shown us anything. I'm not sure why he's still getting a shot. He didn't. I don't think he's shown that much more than Malik Willis, to be honest. And he's got substantially more draft capital. Lots of baggage there. Number 11? I have the Browns. I wanted to have the Browns higher because of Deshaun Watson, but as I kind of, I just put I put the rookies over him. I got Aaron Rodgers over him. There are just some guys that, and then the depth. I appreciated the Josh Dobbs shout out when you were talking about the Titans there, Matt. I think Dobbs is a serviceable backup. He's shown that he's going to be a career backup. At 10, I have the Steelers. Again, it's much like the Patriots. It's a couple guys that kind of can do the same things. I just think the Steelers have better weapons, and despite Matt Canada getting a lot of flack, the Steelers offense seems to produce a little bit better than the Patriots offense for fantasy. And then at number 9, I've got the Colts. Anthony Richardson is my QB 9. I expect that to rise. If we do this, 2 months into the season, he could be top 5 in the AFC. He's got so much potential. We just got to see it come to fruition. Gardner Minshew is who Gardner Minshew is, and so is Sam Ehlinger. They're career backups. I think part of the reason that I'm not higher on the Colts overall is it's going to come down to, can Richardson produce? And if he doesn't produce right away, putting one of those other 2 guys in is not going to solve your problem. So I like Richardson's potential. I think he's going to be able to run his way into fantasy relevance, and probably much high. He'll probably end up being much higher than QB 9 in the AFC, and probably maybe even higher than that in the QBs overall. But for right now, I'm kind of playing it conservative, and I got the Colts as my 9th ranked quarterback team.
So at 12 for me, I have the Steelers. Matt, I mean, you mentioned just a couple of minutes ago. I mean, Kenny Pickett was fine. I think Mitch Trubisky was fine as well. But I just don't see any real fantasy superstar here. I view them a lot, kind of like, honestly, I do the Texans and the Patriots. The only thing that that gave the Steelers a big bump over those two was the weapons around them. They did improve their offensive line. So that is why I felt comfortable ranking them here. But realistically, as I looked at the list above them, I would trust every quarterback I have above. We're really assuming that a lot of these guys will stay healthy through most of the year. So assuming Kenny Pickett stays healthy the most of the year, as is everybody else on this list, I'm taking everybody ahead of them. So that's kind of how they just ended up slotting in here. After them, I have the Dolphins, and I am the lowest of the 3 of us, I think, by a pretty significant margin. They've got Mike White and Skylar Thompson there, which, okay, fine. They're both okay. Mike White's had moments with the New York Jets, but if Tua were to go down, I don't think that either one of those guys is really going to be able to do much for your fantasy teams. And the reason I have them so low here is I said this last year with Tom Brady. I know a little bit different situation because Brady's much older and at the end of his career. But every time you ask a player about, or you hear NFL analysts, former players talk about, if you're thinking about retirement, you're halfway out the door. And I understand it's medical circumstances with Tua Tagovailoa, but he has openly admitted multiple times that he almost stepped away from the game. I pray to God that he does not have any kind of other issues, because that is scary when you have brain injuries. But to not factor that in, to me, is not smart. It's why I have no shares of Tua right now, because I just don't know that I can ever trust it. Like, I feel like every time he takes a hit, if I'm watching on a Sunday, he takes a hit, I will be cringing and worried that this may be the time that he does not get up. The fact that he's openly said, I've thought about retiring, just makes me worry that he could be one more hit away from just doing that. And I would have nothing against him if he did it. You've got to do what's right for you and your health. And I'm also going to be honest, I just don't think he's that overly talented of a quarterback. I think that the team around him is very good, and Mike McDaniels is a genius. So for me, they just ranked fairly low for me. That was kind of my reasoning on having him here at 11. At 10, it's the Jaguars. I mean, I like Trevor Lawrence a lot, but they have CJ Beathard behind him, and that's it. And I mean, Lawrence showed some moments last year, but if anything happens to him and Beathard has to come in, I think you could arguably rank them the 16th best quarterback room then at that point. Like, it's just not good behind him. And I want to see Lawrence continue to take those steps forward. I think we have given him a pass because they came back and beat the Chargers, but he wasn't great at times last year. I want to see him be more consistent. I want to see him be more of what he was in the second half of last season. I felt like he was really coming on, but then still kind of took a couple steps back, at least in my opinion, toward the end of the year. And then 9 for me is the Denver Broncos. Look, I know Russell Wilson had a bad year last year, but I still believe in the talent. I do believe in Sean Payton and the offense that he's going to have there. You know, they have, is it Jared Stidham is currently the backup quarterback for him?
Yeah, Jared Stidham.
We've seen Stidham's been fine in spurts. They've got arguably one of the better offensive lines. I would argue it's probably top 15 at worst. You've got weapons all around him. Even if Javonte doesn't come back healthy, they've got a running back. They've got wide receivers around him. I do think that they will build around Russell Wilson's strengths. We have seen a lot of times when these guys go to new teams that they don't necessarily have the years that they had at their old teams. And then you kind of you bail on them and then they come back. I think Russell Wilson's going to end up being just fine, which is why he comes in at 9 for me, like right in the middle of what the AFC conference is, because it is a loaded conference at quarterback.
Yeah, and we have some of the same here. My number 12 is the Indianapolis Colts, and I think Anthony Richardson does have huge potential, but we've also talked about him having perhaps the least predictable floor of the top 3 that came out, because he was more of a project. It's an all new situation there. I don't love the front line in Indianapolis as much as other people. They've taken some notable steps back in the last 4 years. When Andrew Luck retired, they had probably the best line in the AFC, but they have struggled a little bit since then. They have some interesting weapons, but I don't think that they have the greatest core of weapons around Anthony Richardson. I think he needs time. And behind him, we already know we don't want to have to see Sam Ehlinger play. But Gardner Minshew last year was on the best team in the NFL. He came in and took over a team that had a stranglehold on the first place, and he played so ineffectively that they put out a less than ready Jalen Hurts to make sure that they didn't lose the number 1 seed. That's not impressive to me. He was not impressive to me in Jacksonville. If he ends up starting the season for Indianapolis, I don't think that's going to be great. And that's probably not out of the realm of possibility that we see him for a month before they put Anthony Richardson, try to find a soft landing spot for him. So that's why the Colts are down there. There's incredible potential. Like Dennis said, at the end of the year, can Anthony Richardson be top 10, top 5 in fantasy points? He sure could be, but I don't think it's a lock. A lot of people have the same high hopes for Trey Lance, and I don't want to compare apples to oranges, but you don't know what's going to happen with a rookie quarterback that probably needs a little bit of seasoning when they go in there. So I just have them a little bit lower. Then I have the Patriots. I actually thought Mac Jones was very good as a rookie. Last year, he got handed kind of a crap sandwich in terms of coaching platter. I don't think Bill O'Brien is any of our favorite coach, but that's definitely feels like they actually have an offensive coach that hopefully has an offensive plan. I thought Bailey Zappi looked good when he came in for Jones. Some of the players in the locker room seem to like him. I don't love them as a quarterback, or else I would have them higher than where they are, but I thought that it's probably a little bit better situation than some of the situations below them. I'm the same as you, Matt. I have the Jaguars at 10. Trevor Lawrence had a tough first year without having much of a coach, looked a lot better last year, really came into his own down the stretch. But behind him, CJ Beathard doesn't give me any sense of confidence. And then behind Beathard, they have Nathan Rourke, who has never thrown a pass in an NFL game. So they don't have a lot of experience, and that kind of had me dropping, as we're looking at a unit, back a little bit. And then I have the Broncos at 9. It became sport to tee off on Russell Wilson, and I'm not saying it wasn't hard to watch as somebody that watched all the games, but the Christmas present that the Denver Broncos' new owners gave to fans was firing Nathaniel Hackett after week 16. Week 17 and 18, when they installed a new offensive coordinator, Russell Wilson was QB1 in fantasy football. He ran well. He threw well. He put up good numbers. The Broncos almost clipped Kansas City, almost clipped the Chargers. to close out the season. He looked like a completely different player. Of all the teams that I've looked at so far, he's by far and away the best starting quarterback in the NFL of all the teams that I have below him. He's won a Super Bowl. He's been to 2 Super Bowls. He's put up some incredible numbers and an incredible career record. It did not work for a large swath of the season last year, but the quarterback that we saw once they got rid of Nathaniel Hackett was demonstrably different, and now he has Sean Payton. They saw enough in Jarrett Stidham. I was impressed by his 2-game stretch there to close things out for the Raiders last year, that they went and gave him a pretty substantial contract to be a backup. They just went and signed Ben DiNucci after working him out at rookie camp, who had a pretty spectacular season with the XFL. So they have a little bit behind them, but they don't have an incredible backup situation. But I firmly believe that Russell Wilson is going to look a lot different this year. So I have him up at 9. Matt, do you want to give us your 8 to 5?
Yeah. So at 8, I have the New York Jets. A lot of this is definitely based on Aaron Rodgers, and I don't think that it's close to the end for him at all. I think he just needed to get out of Green Bay. We were playing that dance for the past couple of years about whether he was going to come back to Green Bay or not. If you really go back and look at the games that they had and the way that he played, he still played like that Hall of Fame player. It just there was not really any help around him. A beat up offensive line. The wide receivers were just not good at times. I mean, Christian Watson started coming on late in the season and he started trusting him. But before that, it was really just Romeo Doubs as they got rid of Devontae Adams, which I think was also kind of the final, him wanting to get out the door thing. But now he comes to a New York Jets team that I think is fairly fair to say one of the better teams overall in the AFC. They've got a great offensive line. They definitely have the wide receivers, and I think we're going to see an Aaron Rodgers of old for the next couple seasons. I think he's arguably one of the better. I've said before, I know Tom Brady has more Super Bowls, and Patrick Mahomes has jumped him of late. But over the past couple of years, in my opinion, of my 30-plus years on earth and watching football, Aaron Rodgers was the best quarterback I have ever watched play the game until Patrick Mahomes came along. There's no shot at Tom Brady. That dude is a winner. But Aaron Rodgers, just arm talent and everything about him, I think that guy's still there. And I agree, Zach Wilson, I don't think that he's as bad as he showed, but he's definitely not the number 2 pick. And I think a lot of people stated that he should not have been the number 2 pick. I do think maybe now that he gets a chance to kind of sit back, I do think he needs a new team. Also, you don't really come out and throw your teammates under the bus, say that you're playing perfectly fine. You're not the reason that you're losing. It's probably not the smartest way to handle it when you're throwing interceptions. But regardless, I do think if Rodgers were to go down and they were to put Wilson in, I think with the way they've slowly been building this team, they wouldn't completely fall off a cliff. But a lot of this,
run the ball 110 times a game.
But if they win, they win, and that's all that matters. And Rodgers, I'll be honest, was a big reason on why the Jets ranked as high as they did for me. At 7, I have the Browns, and I think Deshaun Watson's gonna bounce back. I mean, we saw him toward the end of the year play much better. Dude had not played football in 2 years, pretty much. I mean, a year. I don't know, maybe we put too much elevation on the Cleveland Browns, myself included, saying I thought they were going to make a playoff run at the end of the year. I wish they would have been able to hold on to Jacoby Brissett. It made me feel better about this room if something happened to Deshaun Watson, because I don't necessarily trust Josh Dobbs. I don't know why they brought in Kellen Mond. I actually don't think DTR is a bad quarterback to have as a backup. I think he's a comparable and fair backup to have for Deshaun Watson, especially what he can do with his legs. But I do think we'll see Deshaun Watson bounce back to somewhat of the player that we saw in Houston. I don't think he's a top 3 guy. I don't think he's a top 5 guy anymore. But I do think he's likely a top 10-ish fantasy football quarterback. And with the weapons, again, I'm going to keep saying the weapons in the offensive line. It's a big thing for how I rank my quarterbacks. Cleveland has a good offensive line. And for the first time in a long time, they have some pretty good weapons around him. And whether or not Kevin Stefanski will actually pass the ball like he says will be a big thing for Deshaun Watson. But I think that the Browns are going to be perfectly fine with him. I had the Colts here at 6, and a lot of this definitely is Anthony Richardson. But again, the way I approach this I approach it from the fantasy football side of things. I'm going to be honest, I don't care if Anthony Richardson's a good NFL quarterback. He was a number 4 pick overall. If he's winning me fantasy games, that's all I care about. And I think he's going to do that with his legs. I don't think they're going to start Gardner Minshew to start the season. I think you're going to get A. Rich out there week 1. And whether he ends up being Lamar Jackson or Blake Bortles doesn't matter, because both those guys won you fantasy championships with the way they played. Blake Bortles, many people forget, as bad as he was for the Jacksonville Jaguars, he was incredible for your fantasy squads. Now, you didn't want to watch him for 3 quarters, because through 3 quarters, he usually had about 10 points because he had multiple interceptions and wasn't doing anything. But then that 4th quarter, the rushing yards, touchdowns, all of a sudden you look up at the end of the night and dude's sitting there with 35 fantasy points, and you're like, thank you, Blake Bortles. I think Anthony Richardson can do that. I do think he's a much better quarterback than Blake Bortles. I do think he's going to end up being a starter. So at that point, I think you just have to rank him high, because I'm also going to be honest, we're not doing this. Like, I know both of you said maybe as we get closer to the season or into the season, we're not going to do this in the season. So I've got to project, and I've got to, what is it that Ray Garvin said this recently, and it's something I've really tried to stick with when it comes to my rankings. If you think you're going to be right, then rank that you're going to be right. So I am ranking that I'm going to be right on Anthony Richardson. I'm projecting he's going to be that good. So at this point in time, I would think all 3 of us would agree that if Anthony Richardson hits his ceiling, he's going to be even higher than 6, where I have him right now at this point in time next year. So that is why I put him up here. And 5 for me was the Baltimore Ravens. And in my opinion, you could, at least in my rankings, interchange probably 2 to 5, depending on who you thought's the best quarterback. For Lamar, I want to see what this passing game looks like now. I like the addition of Todd Monken. We saw what he was able to do with Stetson Bennett at Georgia the past couple of years. Baker Mayfield had one of his best years when he was the offensive coordinator in Cleveland. So I do think Lamar's going to take that step forward. I just worry a little bit if they still want to run him a lot. We've seen that, unfortunately, the past couple of years. That's led him to some injuries. I want to see if someone else can take that step up outside of Mark Andrews. I love Odell Beckham Jr. He's always going to be one of my favorite players. I think you're betting a lot on a guy who practically doesn't have an ACL in his right knee to be able to come out there and be the stud he was early on in his career. So that part of the equation kind of factored in and brought Lamar back down just a little bit for me, but he's still top 5, and I think the Baltimore Ravens room, because they still have Huntley there, where, again, if something were to happen, we've seen Tyler Huntley perform fairly well in this offense.
I think his official title is NFL Pro Bowler, Tyler Huntley.
I'd do the same thing if I ever made it to a Pro Bowler. You will address me as Pro Bowler Tyler Huntley.
All right, so at number 8, I have the Texans. I seem to be a little bit higher on their overall quarterback room than the 2 of you guys. I only rank Stroud as the 11th ranked QB in the class, but I think Davis Mills, through the last couple of years, he showed some moxie coming in and playing pretty good that first year. And while things didn't go great the second year, the whole team was a dumpster fire. And as the starter, Mills kind of gets the credit or the blame for that. But I think he's a guy that's going to be a capable NFL quarterback. He isn't going to, he's not a rising tide floats all boats kind of quarterback. You put me on he's Trent Dilfer. You give me some good players and a good defense and we'll win some games. You ask me to win some games with some bad players and a bad defense, we're in trouble. We've seen that show. And then their third, let's see, who was that? Case Keenum. Case Keenum is that veteran presence that's going to bring the how to be an NFL quarterback to this quarterback room. So overall, I kind of like it. I think, Stroud has the ability to run. He doesn't run. There's a difference. I think he's always going to be get out of the pocket, look down the field to throw the ball kind of guy. I think we see that, and I'm not making a direct comparison to Mahomes, but when Mahomes is flushed from the pocket, he's not looking to run, he's looking to throw, and I think that's CJ Stroud's mentality, regardless of his athleticism. So I've got the Texans at 8. I have the Jaguars at 7. I think that Trevor Lawrence is a better quarterback than Russell Wilson. If you want to compare him to Russell Wilson of 5, 6, 7 years ago, then maybe maybe we can have that debate. But last year, this year, Trevor Lawrence is a better quarterback than Russell Wilson. Who they don't have squat for backups. It's all based. I think I have Wilson as my, or not Wilson. Lawrence is my quarterback 5 in the AFC. The Chargers are my quarterback room 6. We've seen it from Justin Herbert. He's got good weapons. He makes plays. I don't know if it's the coaching that's holding that team back. Something isn't. They're not quite clicking 100% all the time. I know last year we had some injuries with Keenan Allen. Mike Williams misses a couple games a year, it seems. But at 6'6" and 235 pounds and good mobility, Herbert and Lawrence are kind of the same guy. They both can run well. They both throw it well. I have the Chargers at 6. And then I've got the Ravens at 5. I agree. I'm interested to see what's happening with this offense with Todd Monken coming in. I think they're going to throw it more. I just don't know what that means. I think Bateman's probably going to have a better year, but can he have a worse than his last couple of years? He just needs to stay healthy. They've got OBJ. I don't know what he's got left in the tank. Mark Andrews is the alpha receiver, and we've seen Isaiah Likely perform at a really high level as well. So could we see Bateman and OBJ on the outside with Andrews in the slot and Likely at tight end? Maybe that might get some stuff done. We got J.K. Dobbins. I expect him to have a great year. I think the years of Lamar Jackson rushing for 1,100 yards are over. I think he knows that. He signed this fat contract, and while he doesn't have a lot to lose by playing hard and getting injured, I think he wants to play as long as he possibly can. And so he's going to work on elevating his game. When he had that 36 passing touchdown season, he did it on a very low volume of passing attempts. I think he wants to be a better passer, and that's part of the reason I think that he was unhappy with how things were in Baltimore. He wanted a better offensive coordinator for the passing game, and he's got it in Monken. That's why the Ravens and Lamar Jackson are my QB room 5.
Yeah, for me at 8, I have the same as Matt. I went with the New York Jets. If it was Aaron Rodgers of 5 years ago, I'd probably have the Jets higher. Him going into the darkness retreat saying he was 90% convinced he was going to retire, you have to factor in and have some pause. He's 39 years old. He's also coming off one of his worst seasons as a starter. He didn't hit 4,000 yards last year. He had double-digit interceptions for the first time in over a decade. He looked noticeably uncomfortable. On the flip side, he has probably one of the best set of weapons he's ever had going to the Jets. So I think there's some potential there. Behind him, Zach Wilson, maybe they will be able to have something of a reclamation project with him getting to sit behind Aaron Rodgers. I also have questions personally about their new choice of offensive coordinator, having lived through that experience myself. So I felt comfortable putting him here, but not really any higher. Number 7 for me, Cleveland Browns. Deshaun Watson, Matt, you were right the first time. He missed almost 2 full years because he was completely gone in 2021, missed the first 13 weeks of 2022, came back, looked a little rusty. I thought he looked a little better by the end, having a full off season. They've worked on giving him more weapons. I'm hoping that we see more of a bounce back. When we last saw him play a full season, he was a top 5 option in the NFL, but that was back in 2020, so things have changed a little bit. I actually kind of like Josh Dobbs behind them. I thought he looked pretty good when he came in off the street and took Tennessee pretty close to getting to the playoffs against what turned out to be a pretty good and pretty frisky Jaguars team. So I thought that was a reasonable backup to have them there. Miami Dolphins came in at 6 for me. I have some reservations. I like Tua and I like his ceiling. They couldn't go any higher than that for me because you just don't know. He's probably one hit away from being done. I liked the Mike White signing that they have behind him. I thought Mike White looked decent at times. Skylar Thompson wasn't incredible last year, but he actually was very competitive in a playoff game against the Bills after being a 7th-round rookie last year and getting thrust into a starting role. I actually think that gives them a second and third string quarterback that have some experience and have some upside. So that's why I felt comfortable putting the Dolphins up at 6. And then my number 5, I went with the Chargers. And the reason that they're below the team that I have at 4, which is the Ravens, is I like Justin Herbert a lot. I don't like what they have behind him. I don't have a lot of confidence in Easton Stick. Max Duggan was a late round rookie selection. Maybe he'll be okay, maybe not. If something happened to Herbert, I don't know what would happen to the Chargers. They have a decent offense, but I don't know if they have as dominant an offense as they had when Herbert was a rookie 3 years ago. And I don't know what would happen without him. I think we also saw that put a little bit of a cap on him last year because they had some struggles with offense. I don't know that, I'm interested in the Quentin Johnson pick. We'll see how that shakes out. They still have a lot of questions in the backfield. Austin Eckler's still kind of upset there. So for me, I like Justin Herbert a lot. They don't have anything behind him, so I knocked them back behind the teams that I have in the top 4 spots. Dennis, you want to give us your top 4?
Yeah, I'll go. I've got the Dolphins at 4. 2 is at 7 for me. I as much as we have to consider any hit could be his last, we also have to acknowledge that it's that way for any player in the NFL. And while I get Tua's got that concussion history, we've had other players come into the league with concussion histories, and some have worked out fine and some have not. He's got great weapons. He's built for that offense. I like the Mike White signing. He's kind of middle of the road for me when it comes to QB2s. I think he's a guy that can come in and get the ball to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle in the short area. That's what this team does. Skylar Thompson, I think he kind of held his own coming in when he was called upon, and he showed some moxie. I think if he gets a couple more seasons of being a backup under his belt, he's looking at a long career as a QB2 in the NFL, backing somebody up and getting the occasional spot start. So I have the Dolphins at 4. The top 3 were really, I guess it's not, you could make an argument, I suppose, that you could put them in just about any order, but I've got the Bills at 3. Josh Allen is my QB2, but Kyle Allen is my QB 14 in the number 2s, and Matt Barkley at 7 is kind of in the middle. I like what Josh Allen throws the ball well. He's got great weapons. He runs the ball well. He's going to get you points on the ground and through the air. I think that I just ended up having the Bengals, who I have at number 2. I like Trevor Siemian a lot better as a backup than I do Kyle Allen. Siemian is my QB4 when it comes to the backups. I think he's just better. Jake Browning about the same as Matt Barkley. I don't think either of them have a whole lot of upside. And then my QB1, I think in my QB room 1, a lot of it is based on the top end, and it's all Patrick Mahomes. I think Mahomes is the best QB in the game, and as hard as it may seem sometimes, I think that you have to give the weight of what he brings to the table and how he's able to win. Can he run? He can run a little bit. He's not overly fast. He's fast enough. But the plays he makes with his arms, the creativity he has, the way he can keep a play alive and then just make something happen. Gabbert's the QB2, Shane Buechele at 3. You're not counting on either one of those, but I think Gabbert is a veteran. He's been in the league now, 8 years, 9 years. He's going to, if he has to come in, I think he's every bit as good as Chad Henne was. So, I don't know what that's saying, but it all comes down to Patrick Mahomes leading the QB room 1 for me.
Hey, Chad Henne won him a playoff game against the Cleveland Browns, so I won't besmirch the good name of Chad Henne at all. For my top four, it really came down to, in my opinion, some of the best quarterbacks in the AFC. Again, I would put Lamar in that conversation, but the one thing that separated the rest of them was the fact that they are almost always healthy. And I think, availability is the best ability, as coaches say, even when Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, and Justin Herbert, who are my top four, have been hurt, they always go out there and play, and they always seem to get you those fantasy points, and that's what matters. So I put Herbert here at 4. We'll see. I think Kellen Moore is a good addition to that coaching staff. They've got the weapons. They've got a decent offensive line. I feel bad saying this because I feel like for the past 4 years we've said the Chargers have got to do it this year, and I feel like they're still stuck in that mode of they've got to do it this year. They finally made the playoffs. Despite what I know some people blame Justin Herbert for that, I blame more the defense, how you have 4 picks against Trevor Lawrence and then let him throw 4 touchdowns for you in the second half. I don't understand, but that part of it is what it is. I still think Herbert is one of the best quarterbacks in the AFC. It was really hard for me with 3 and 2. I think there's a hair between the two of them, but for 3, I put the Buffalo Bills. And a lot of that is why I love Josh Allen, and I do think he has more fantasy upside sometimes than Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow's actually been more consistent lately, and he has been really damn good for a quarterback who isn't the fastest. He's not the most athletic. He's actually probably – so if you were to look at the rankings of the top 4, I'll just give my last 2. Joe Burrow's 2, and Patrick Mahomes is 1. If you were to take the top 4 quarterbacks here on my list, Joe Burrow would have the worst arm. He'd have arguably the worst offensive line. He would have the worst mobility out of all 4 of these guys, yet he managed to put up stats better than all of these guys except for Patrick Mahomes when it comes to fantasy. Like, he's an absolute incredible player. He is the closest thing I think we will see to Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. That's not a freak like Josh Allen and what Patrick Mahomes can do. Because I swear Patrick Mahomes at times is able to detach his arm from his body and throw the ball, and then it goes right back to him. It's absolutely ridiculous. So that is why he came in just ahead of Josh Allen for me. I love the consistency. It's a very safe floor, and he has a very high ceiling as well without the rushing upside, which is outstanding. And then number 1 is Patrick Mahomes. I think it's not unfair to say that at this point in time, I don't think this is a hot take. I'll just go ahead and say it. Even if he doesn't win another Super Bowl, which I would find fairly hard, but it is very hard to win Super Bowls, I think it's going to be fair to say he's going to go down as probably the best quarterback to play the game. He's just that talented. I mean, he's a guy that, for me, I look at him a lot like I did Tom Brady and Bill Belichick early on in their careers. Like, I hate him because he's so good. You can never count him out. He's always going to win games, but my God, you respect him for his toughness, his ability to just win games, and in my opinion, will the team to victory, because I don't think any of us maybe dropped him out of lower than QB2. I think I may have had Josh Allen ahead of him coming into last season. There were a lot of people who faded Patrick Mahomes, saying he's probably going to be QB 4 or 5 or 6 because he lost Tyreek Hill and this offense is not going to be good. And then he just goes out there and has the best passing season of his career, losing supposedly his best weapon in Tyreek Hill. The dude's amazing. He's going to be QB1 more than likely as long as he decides to play the game. So it doesn't. They could have Matt Bruning, Matt Fox, and Dennis Bennett as Patrick Mahomes' backup quarterbacks in that quarterback room, and the Chiefs are going to be number 1.
How dare you put us
To be
down?
fair, I'm more of a rushing threat.
That's fair. That's fair. I don't have the arm anymore, so I'm just regardless. They could all scheme us into that offense, and I'm still taking.
They're gonna see me out there. They're gonna be like, "Hey, is that Big Ben? Did he make a comeback?"
I'm just gonna ask the Chiefs center how far he can shotgun the snapback. Can you do 30 yards? So I had already mentioned I had the Ravens at 4. For me, the difference between them and the Chargers probably comes down to backup. There are definitely concerns with Lamar's health, but I actually think he might have a higher ceiling than Justin Herbert because of his rushing ability.
So what I'm hearing is if the Chargers had all-pro quarterback Easton Stick as their backup, the Chargers would be higher.
They do have Easton Stick as their backup.
Right, but if he was all-pro quarterback Easton Stick instead of all-pro quarterback Tyler Huntley.
I mean, Huntley's actually, his record's not incredible, but he has actually looked pretty decent back there coming in for Lamar. I think he is one of the better backup quarterbacks. I don't know what that's saying, but he is one of the better backup quarterbacks. But like I said, I think Lamar might have a higher ceiling than Herbert. They're both really good. I mean, it's not like you're discounting any of these guys. And as I said earlier, I would probably take a lot of the teams I have in my top 8 of the AFC over any team in the NFC that wasn't the Eagles. So, I think the AFC just has some better quarterbacks, especially up at the top. Number 3 for me was the Bengals. I like Joe Burrow. It's interesting, Dennis, you said you like Trevor Siemian better than Kyle Allen. I've seen them both play for Denver, and I have the opposite opinion. I actually like Kyle Allen better, and I think Josh Allen, I just have always loved him a little bit more, so maybe that's personal bias. So I have them up there too. And I actually think Matt Barkley is one of the better third-string quarterbacks they have. He has looked good in stretches when he's had to play for different teams. He has some of them. He's one of the more experienced third-string quarterbacks. And then number 1 for me was obviously the Chiefs. Mahomes is great. It was a blow to them to lose Chad Henne, who was actually a very good backup who had been there for a long time and stepped in. But they went and got a very experienced backup in Blaine Gabbert. He's not a guy that's going to lead your franchise, but that's a pretty nice security blanket to have back there. And in Andy Reid, we seem to trust there. So that is our quarterback group. Dennis, why don't you give your 16-1 as a recap?
So I have the Raiders at 16, the Titans at 15, Patriots 14, Broncos 13, Jets at 12, Browns at 11, Steelers 10, Colts 9, Texans 8, Jaguars 7, Chargers 6, Ravens 5, Dolphins 4, Bills 3, Bengals 2, and Kansas City Chiefs at number 1.
Matt, how about your 16?
There we go. So at 16, I have the Tennessee Titans, 15, the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Patriots, the Texans, the Steelers, the Miami Dolphins, and then the Jacksonville Jaguars round out 16-10. And then my top 10, the Denver Broncos come in at 9 with the New York Jets, Cleveland Browns, Indianapolis Colts, Baltimore Ravens, Los Angeles Chargers, Buffalo Bills, Cincinnati Bengals, and number 1, the Kansas City Chiefs.
And for me, I have the Titans at 16, the Raiders at 15, the Texans at 14, the Steelers at 13, the Colts at 12, Patriots at 11, Jaguars at 10, Broncos at 9, Jets at 8, Browns at 7, Dolphins at 6, Chargers at 5, Ravens at 4, Bengals at 3, Bills at 2, and unfortunately the Chiefs at 1. Having to face them twice a season has been just so exceptional for my mental health. That'll do it for our look at quarterbacks. On Monday, we will begin our look at running backs. We will look at the NFC running back groups. But before we get out of here, it is the weekend. And since there isn't football out there, you may be thinking about going to the movies. So I think Matt knows what time it is. It is time to touch base for a little Marvel Hot Corner. Maybe you didn't get out there the first weekend in May. You had a big Cinco de Mayo rager, so you couldn't go see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. It is still out there. I will start. I am a huge Guardians fan. Guardians of the Galaxy is still my number 1 MCU movie and one of my favorite superhero movies of all time. I was not sure I was emotionally prepared to see this 3rd installment. I loved it. Yeah. I thought it was very emotionally engaging, fulfilling. I thought it was a great way to end this kind of chapter with this configuration of Guardians. I don't know that we're going to see all these guys back. James Gunn obviously moving over to take over DC. I thought it was a great film. I actually have it embedded in there in my top 10 favorite Marvel films. It didn't surpass the first Guardians for me, but the holiday special, and the original Guardians are some of my most favorite Marvel films.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I really enjoyed it. I thought, and I don't want this to sound like a negative. I thought it was going to be a little bit more I was prepared to be like sobbing uncontrollably in the theater because I hate to say it this way. I thought there was going to be certain things that happen in movies. People haven't seen it, so I don't want to give too much away.
No.
So that part of it I think was good. I do. See, I don't know how long we can wait before we're like spoilers, right? Because like there's certain things I want to say about the movie, and I don't want to ruin it for anybody. So it was a great movie. I am with you. It's very close to one, but one is still my favorite. I don't know that I can put 3 over it, but I know a lot of people who have 3 over it. I don't have an issue with that at all. I have an issue if you put 2 over either one of them, but I have no problem if you want to put 3 at 1. So I will say spoilers now. So that's my overall review because I am going to give some things away. So if you're not seeing the movie, please, save this episode. Come back after you have a chance to watch
That's right.
it.
If you have not seen the movie, now is your time to drop off and go find the podcast, subscribe, give us a rating, a review. It really it brightens our day and our weekend.
I love the way that they handled Groot and Gamora. I do kind of hate that Gamora went off, but I like that she found her family after everything happened. And I don't know how much of the stuff you've seen of the James Gunn interviews and everything. So Gamora wasn't obviously this was not supposed to happen, but because she was killed in Endgame, was it Endgame? No, she was killed
Infinity War.
in Infinity War. That they had to kind of like change the way Guardians 3 went because of that. I also didn't like the fact that Drax had to stay. I wanted him to be able to leave with Mantis. That did kind of bother me a little bit because those two just had that like chemistry, almost like I don't want to say a couple thing. They were more like brother sister. And I would have loved for them to be able to go off on their own. But like I loved everything else about him. I love that, Chris Pratt got to go back home and be with his grandfather again. I love the way that Rocket is now going to be the leader of the Guardians, and I imagine that's the group that we're going to see, in Kang's Dynasty and Secret Wars moving forward. I'm going to be very curious to see if the ending meant that it's Chris Pratt coming back, because I have a feeling that it is not, though it does seem like he has been the one actor who's been most open to coming back. Like Zoe Saldana's already said she's never coming back. Drax seems to kind of be, or Dave Bautista seems to be done with the role as well. But I feel like
it could be. So I don't know if you remember at the end of Thor: Love and Thunder, at the credits, it says Thor will return. And when they asked Chris Hemsworth, he's like, I had no idea that was in there. That's news to me. Yeah. I feel like they did the same thing to Chris Pratt. They just don't want people to think that that they're done with these characters, and they're going to probably try hard. I mean, Marvel has a lot of problems right now, including that they may have to recast Kang, which is a massive deal for their entire 5-year plan. Yeah. People have 5-year plans. Theirs kind of went downhill, but I'm with you. I will not spoil anything. I'll just say people that know me know I watch a lot of movies. I have Guardians of the Galaxy as my number 1 movie of the year so far. So
what's 320?
I'd have to go look. I've seen 340 so far. I thought
you said 320, so I was
as of where cool. I'm sitting. Yeah, no, I'd have to go drop my year and look and see what I have knocked down. I know what actually the worst movie I've seen all year is the remake of House Party.
I didn't even know that they remade that. So
you don't look for it. Yeah. My second favorite movie of the year, though, just came on to Prime, and that is Air, which is the story of Nike signing Michael Jordan. If you haven't seen that is worth checking out as well. But I know our shared love of Marvel.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it was well, and so my theory on that too is I actually don't think that we will see Chris Pratt come back. Usually when they do those end scenes, it's the opposite, right? It's a black screen with the white writing, and this time it was a white screen with. I wonder if they're setting you up for Star-Lord is going to be back. It's going to be a variant. It could be somebody different because as we've seen, as I was talking to someone about this the other day, one of my friends was like, well, no, it's always the same person. I'm like, no, it's not. The only person that we know is the same right now is Doctor Strange. And what's her name? The woman that he's in love with, and I can't played by
Oh,
Rachel
Rachel
McAdams, the
McAdams.
lovely Rachel
Yeah.
McAdams. She's the same in some of those universes as well, but like we've already seen, obviously, Reed Richards is not going to be. John Krasinski will no longer be playing that role, so it'll be a different Reed Richards. There's what was it? Captain America is not the same. It's Peggy Carter is Captain Britain, quote unquote. It's not Steve Rogers and the other, so it could be somebody completely different. And maybe that's what they're setting us up for, is that we're Star-Lord's coming
If Marvel
back.
had an incredible sense of humor, it would be Chris Pine. Is who they would cast, just to keep the Chris Wars going.
But yeah, it was a great movie. I'm excited because Quantumania just dropped on Disney Plus yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
So me and my wife will be watching that tomorrow. So as I still have yet had a chance to watch that, so I'm excited to watch that and catch up on that. But yeah, it's a great movie. It's one of the, I feel bad saying this because I do love Marvel movies. It's one of the Marvel movies that I will definitely rewatch multiple times. There's been some Marvel movies of late that have come out. I'm like, I feel like one and done is fine. I don't probably need to go back and watch it. This is one that I will likely go back and watch multiple times. It was a great movie.
Some point in the future, Dennis is going to decide that he wants to catch up on all this, and we're going to be like 65 movies deep.
Oh, I want to catch up on it. I got one more kid to get through graduation and college, so I'm still 10 years out.
Well, hey, by that time we'll be on to phase 10, so you'll have to take off like a month just to be able to watch and catch up on everything.
And I'll be senile and won't remember. So,
well, on that cheery note, so enjoy your weekend. If you want to get out there, there's plenty of good movies out there. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Matt and I both loved it. A lot of people are excited for Fast 10. Also came out this week. Of all the movies I've seen this year, that is one of them. Hope you guys have a great weekend.
I'm going to shout out my kids before we go. Thursday night, my youngest son got the Director's Award in his orchestra performance, playing the cello. Then last night he was having his best game, or Wednesday night was orchestra, his best baseball game. Started out with 2 hits, slid into first base, hit the bag funny, ended up in the urgent care. He's all bruised up.
It sounds like Matt playing softball.
Caleb graduating. We went to the school yesterday for a little ceremony. He's graduating with academic honors as he heads off to Ohio State. So great job to Mom. She kicked ass.
Well, that'll do it for us today. Come back on Monday and we will look at running backs. It's probably good we're grading the entire running back room, since almost every team in the league is now running back by committee.